Hello, welcome to Christmas decorating episode number 5. This week we are in the kitchen. We are going big. If you're new to the channel, hi, I'm Tracy and welcome to my home here in Sussex, England. My regular viewers will not be surprised by the fact that we're going big in the kitchen today. I love big statement decorating, but everything I do can be scaled down or up. Last week we went shopping for Christmas trees, as I only ever use real trees. I went for what I said was a generous 7 foot and 9 foot. The 9 foot actually turned out to be a very generous 10 foot. The ceiling height in the kitchen is actually 10 foot, so I've had to do a little bit of adjustment. I like to prep the trees in the back of the car and make sure that that stand actually fits. So I've got the tree into the house, loving it in its position, but the decoration that I did on the chandelier in my summer and my fall decorating is conflicting with it. So I'm going to take that down, but I'm going to set it aside because I'm going to reuse it in the Christmas decor. The stands I use have reservoirs in them, which is useful because these trees love to drink. But that's pretty ugly to look at, so I'm not going to waste money on tree skirts. I'm actually going to use logs to dress around the bottom of the tree. After Christmas, they'll just go into the log pile and be used in one of our 3 wood burners. Before we do anything else to the tree, I'm going to put some lights onto the big dresser. I'm loving these copper cluster lights at the moment. I'm going to link again below in the description. I'll try and link as much as I possibly can. I love the way these delicate little lights reflect against the vintage glass and the vintage decanters we have on here. Now, tree topper. My tree topper always goes on first. This one is sprayed in my all-time favourite gold spray. I have had this for years and years. In fact, I remember once it was purple covered in glitter. What can I say? I've been around a long time and my tastes constantly change. Fortunately, I love to upcycle. I was doing that before the word was even invented, and with the power of paint, things live with me for ages and they just keep on changing. So I think I got away with that by the skin of my teeth. It is literally touching the ceiling. Now onto the lights. So I've got 2,000 lights here, and the way I stop them getting tangled up is I always wrap them on a tube. And before I start putting them on the tree, I switch them on just to make sure that they're working. For maximum twinkle with my lights, I run them along the branch. So from the tip all the way into the tree to the trunk, and just keep on repeating that process. This vase on the white dresser keeps catching my eye, so I'm going to give it a little dressing. It's a brown velvet ribbon, a pine cone sprayed with my favourite gold spray, and I think that just finishes it off nicely. So we're going to go on to the tree dressing now. I made some DIY decorations in my very first video, so check that out for details. I actually got these when I went to the Malvern Fair, so you remember these bobbins. And these were string lights out in the garden. The deer kept ripping them down, so I've turned them into baubles. I'm going to use some very old acorn glittery baubles and some crystal birds that were given to me by a dear friend. Every year I find the most naffest ornament on my beautifully styled tree, and it's my son-in-law. It's become a running family joke now. He smuggles one in and then sees how many days it takes for me to find it. Fortunately, I love him to bits. Now onto the table. Whenever I'm dressing a table, I remove all of the chairs. I just find it so much easier to move around, to clear everything off, to get everything into position. Now, I'm not taking these things out of the kitchen because I'm going to use them again somewhere else. But I must tell you, I am going to redo this table probably in January because I really just fancy a change. I picked up these table runners in HomeSense a few weeks ago. They were reduced down to just £7 each. Now, one of them is not long enough to do my table, so I'm using two, just overlapping them. I always bring one chair back in at each end because I want to get that in the exact position. I don't want it folding, hanging onto the chair. And of course, the tape measure does come out because it will drive me bonkers if it's not actually in the complete centre of the table. Now, I'm quite happy with that position. So the chairs are back out, but I want to run a board along it. So we're out into the garage. I've got a very long scaffold board here and I want about 6 foot off it. So I'm just marking that, make sure I get a nice straight line. We're not going to use any power tools. It's just a handsaw. And I just work my way through until I get that cut. Sanding block over it just ever so lightly just to clean it up. And then it's good to come in and go into the exact centre point of the table. And yes, the tape measure is back out. Remember the greenery that was in the chandeliers? Well, yes, it's back out and it's going to be used. These actually came from Hobby Lobby in Chicago. My son brought them back to the UK with him. I absolutely love them because they're so versatile and they look almost like moss. So yes, I could go and get moss out of the garden, but that's going to be very messy. I've got them, so why not use them? My idea is to run brass candlesticks all the way along. So I am rounding up everything that I can find in the house, every single last one. I've used some others in my snug, in my living room decoration, which was last week's video. So this carries on the theme. Now, the way I like to do it is before I put it on the board, before I put them on, I line them up on the table. It's much easier then just to keep rearranging. I don't want any of the pairs together. So I'm creating almost like a mirror image, but I want the sizes to be up and down. I think there's nothing gives greater twinkly effect than candles all at different heights. I'm using the tallest one as my centerpiece, and then I'm going to spread out from there. So it looks very random, but it's actually really considered. Fortunately, I haven't needed to use all of them, so I can continue that brass theme elsewhere. It's also a great way of using up your old candles, as long as they're all the same colour. Now, I keep the wobbly ones in position using museum wax. Finally managed to get hold of that in the UK, so again I'll link that below. And just a little blob on the bottom and in it goes, and it'll hold it nice and straight. For the ones that are too big, then I just use a flame to melt the bottom all the way around and then squeeze it in, and it sets really solid. So far so good. I'm happy with it, but it needs more. So we're going to head outside now and collect some greenery. Fortunately, we're lucky to have some lovely land here and I can get all my greenery. I can go out in my pajamas, quite frankly, and do all my cuttings. I've got lovely lelandai, which I use a lot in styling all year round in all my greenery, and I'm even planting lelandai as well. I'm going to take some of this pine, which I love, and one other, and I didn't know the name of it, so I asked my viewers, and the lovely Isabella in Rome, Italy, came back and told me it's called an oriental spruce. So thank you so much for that. Now, how do you get a wheelbarrow down some very steep stairs in a kitchen without using a board? Answer: very carefully. The wait till your husband comes home to help you has never really been on my radar. I just like to get on with it. I'm going to take little bits and just work it into the faux garland. Nice little fresh bits. No, they're not going to be in any water. and they're just going to dry back naturally. I'm adding some thin twigs just for interest, keeping everything low, and also gold twigs, although we're calling them brass twigs. It's a theme that's running through all of my Christmas decorating this year. I'm then going to add some pine cones, so I'm going to search for the very small ones and the ones that haven't had any spray on them because I want it to look very natural. After a bit of a clear up, we're good to put the chairs back and light the candles. So I hope that table's given you some ideas on how to create a super easy, cheap centrepiece. Get yourself around the charity shops, the thrift stores. You can find mismatching candlesticks and then just spray them all the same colour. And we're going to go on to styling the big pine dresser. So the ladders are going to be needed here as I am quite vertically challenged and I need to get up top. I'm bringing in twigs and some more fresh greenery. I'm going to run with the brass twigs and hydrangeas that I've cut from the garden and dried through the autumn. And I'm going to move that chair out the way because this is going to get a bit messy. I'm going to use all fresh here, fresh and dried, so there's not going to be anything faux. And rather than using small pieces of greenery, I'm going to create this out of maybe 4 or 5 big pieces, so big branches of the Leylandii. And it's really just a case of working them in between the ornaments, the pots that are very heavy, that are still there. So there's no fixings, no glues, no commands, whatever they are. I am useless with those things. They never work for me. This is very much a make it up on the hoof design because the branches will go where the branches want to go. So it's trying to fit it together like a jigsaw puzzle really. But I do find stepping back quite often really helps. I'm leaving negative space at one end because I don't want the design to interfere with the twisted willow, the lights and the baubles that are up there. Those are the ones that I did on episode number 1 of this series. Once the greenery is in position, I'm going to start bringing in some very lightweight branches. Again, stepping back, seeing what's going to work where, and then just gently feeding them in. I'm going to add some of the hydrangeas, but before I do, I'm popping some of that brass gold. All right, it's gold, but it's a very matte gold, so it looks more like brass. I'm putting some of that spray on anyway. Along with the hydrangea heads, I'm also going to be adding pine cones and some brown pampas grass because that's what we're using this Christmas. I'm adding some more bells here. I've used them in other rooms in the house. I bought them some years ago from HomeSense. And if you saw my Malvern flea market video, you'll remember this little box, this little trug that I got for £10 from the lady who was selling the bobbins. I'm going to put a base in here. This is old packing material. I always save my packing material because it's so useful. I'm going to put on some old Hessian. It's all frayed at the edges, been used so many times, adding some fresh greenery. And then once I've got that base there, I'm going to add some pine cones and some lovely big baubles for some sparkle. These are baubles that I've had for years. I think originally I bought some of them from HomeSense, my favourite shop. And I've just taken off the little hangers and added twine to them so it keeps it all cohesive. Again, it's another super simple idea. It's something you could use anywhere in your Christmas decorations. You can use it as a centerpiece for your Christmas table. It's very easy to put together. Just look around your home, see what you've already got. You don't need to buy anything specific really to do pretty much anything that I'm showing you this Christmas. So a few more little additions to the dresser and then I think we're done. We're going to start moving around to the business side of the kitchen now, but before we do, let's just do this little spot here. We love this old chair. Everybody sits on this chair. So in this little corner here, I'm going to put in a torchère that I bought from the auctions. I did a paint effect on that and I'm adding a candle that I found in a charity shop that is pretty much the same colour as the candles on the table, but I got the pillar candle for £3 and a basket that I use all the time. Now on top of the fridge freezer I've got a vintage old basket and that's full of pine cones and I think that's good enough actually. That can just stay as it is. Now moving on to the countertops. So I want to bring some festive cheer here, something in this window, into the other window and then all the way along the countertop. So I think I'm going to run some copper cluster lights again, fixing them just into position there with a little bit of the museum wax and then doing nothing more complicated than just stretching them the full length, propping them behind the chopping boards and around the pots at that end. Remember the big pot off the kitchen table? Well, it's back. I think this is going to be a great spot for it, but it needs a little bit of tweaking. So the baubles I made in episode 1 have come out. The packing material that I've used in it in order to keep the twigs in the right position, I've taken some of that out because I need to spread the branches to create the space in the reveal. They were just too high and too tight. So I really need to make sure that they're going to stay in position as I'm going to be adding different baubles to them. I'm using baubles that have the same tones, the same colours, that coordinate with what I've already used. And again, for that cohesive feel, I've added twine to them in order to hang them. That looks fine as it is, but I think you know me by now. That's not quite enough, is it? I've rounded up another one of these garlands that my son Giles brought back from America. This one's actually come out of the cottage. So I'm just tucking it in all the way around, and now I've got it in, I'm going to add some more pine cones, because that is the theme. And then we're going to add some more fresh greenery and of course the brown pampas, which is appearing all the way through the Christmas decorating. And now to this end of the countertops. I'm quite happy with everything that's there. So I'm going to leave everything in position, and even the wreath, I'm just going to zhuzh that up a little bit. It worked fine in the summer. I spruced it up for the autumn, and now I'm just adding a few of the embellishments for Christmas that we're already using. Little bit of brown ribbon, and it just gives it that elevation to Christmas. Now I've climbed down, I'm going to put the bowl back into position, and I'm just going to add a few bits to this, a few different baubles as well. Again, trying to keep all that scheme together, keep everything cohesive. These are all baubles that I've used over previous years. I haven't bought any new ones here. It's just going through and grouping colours together, grouping tones together to see what you can reuse in a different way. I am going to put some fresh greenery in this pot, but before I do, I just want to show you one of our little Christmas traditions. So I've got this great big glass vase. It looks like a brandy glass, and every year I do this. I buy tubs and tubs of these chocolates and then mix them all up and just fill up the vase. It always feels like the start of Christmas for me when I do this. When the kids were away at university, I used to send them pictures of the jar and they used to be so happy because they knew they were coming home for Christmas. Now let's get this arrangement done here. So I'm just using an old jar that I've filled with water and it's going into the pot. Clippings from that beautiful oriental spruce tree that I have, some old hessian just to wrap around underneath. It hides the jar, so that way you don't have to use tons and tons of greenery trying to cover everything up. I've got some pine cones that are still attached to branches, and I've given them just a light coating of white paint just so it looks frosted, and then a big pine cone again with a little bit of paint. This has got to be my favourite freebie of the year. Found it at the auctions, a box with a rotten bottom. Took the bottom off, added chicken wire, and I used it for dried hydrangeas. Now I want to put some fresh foliage in water. So the chocolate boxes, here are two of them that will squidge just in the bottom there. And if I then turn it over, I can add water. So now I can use it for fresh foliage with water. Perfect containers, and they fit so snugly. Perfect recycling. I'm going to use clippings from the garden, slightly smaller ones this time, just poking them through the chicken wire and making sure that they actually hit those two chocolate tubs with the water in. Now hydrangeas is a theme this year, so I'm putting a great big one that I've dropped a bit of gold spray on, brass spray, and adding my stone effect baubles that I made in episode 1. Just to finish it all off.